Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Hong Kong Palace Museum. The Hong Kong Palace Museum aspires to become one of the world's leading cultural institutions committed to the study and appreciation of Chinese art and culture, while advancing dialogue among world civilization through international partnership. The museum is a collaborative project between the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority and the Palace Museum. Thank you for joining our HKPM talk series, The Role of Digital Technology in Heritage Preservation and Research in Museum and University. This event is jointly organized by the Hong Kong Palace Museum and University of Chicago. I'm Celia Wang, a Hong Kong Palace Museum student ambassador, and it is a great honor to be here with you all and be the MC today. Before we officially begin, I would like to say a big hello to those who join us through online. There will be a Q&A section at the end of the talk. For the on-site audience, please scan the QR code on the slip distributed at entry and submit your questions. And for the online viewers, you may submit your question through the Zoom webinar. Now, let me introduce today's moderator, Ms. Elizabeth O'Neill, the Executive Director Interim of the Hong Kong Jockey Club, University of Chicago Academic Complex, the University of Chicago Francis and Rose Yuen campus in Hong Kong, onto the stage.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome our in-person and our virtual audience to this event co-organized by the University of Chicago and our gracious hosts, the Hong Kong Palace Museum. Today's session brings together leading museum professionals and scholars to explore how digital technologies are reshaping the preservation, study, and presentation of cultural heritage. Reflecting on new exhibitions on Egyptian art here at the Hong Kong Palace Museum and the exhibition opening today at the University of Chicago's Hong Kong campus, the speakers will share insights into innovative digital cultural heritage projects, the contribution of digital technologies in the museum context, and in transformative interdisciplinary research. So before I introduce our speakers, I would like to take just a few very brief moments to introduce the University of Chicago for those of you who might be less familiar with who we are and what we do. University of Chicago was founded in 1890 and is a world-leading research university. For more than 135 years, the university has forged its own path. This has led to new schools of thought and a transformative education for students. And it has also laid the groundwork for breakthroughs across sciences, medicine, economics, law, business, history, culture, the arts, and humanistic inquiry. Indeed, this thought leadership is reflected in the 101 Nobel laureates affiliated with the university. In addition to our home campus in Chicago, we have global centers in Paris, Delhi, Beijing. We have a campus in London, and our flagship campus in Asia is here in Hong Kong. As a university, we have a strong commitment to the arts and humanities and to heritage and community. And in fact, perhaps some of you have been to our Hong Kong campus in Mount Davis, where you will know that we have a revitalized grade 3 heritage site and provide guided tours and special exhibitions throughout the year, one of which you'll hear a little bit more about today. So for today's session, again, the main event, we are delighted to collaborate with the Hong Kong Palace Museum to explore the role of digital technologies in heritage preservation and research in museums and universities. Without further ado, I would like to introduce today's speakers and invite them to the stage. So, okay, well, all together, that sounds good. So first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Wei-Cheng Lin, who is an associate professor of art and history in the college at the University of Chicago. And he specializes in the history of Chinese art and architecture with a focus on medieval periods. His primary research interests concern issues of visual and material culture in Buddhist art and architecture, and China's funerary practice through history. Professor Lin is the faculty director for the Dispersed Chinese Art Digitization Project and is also the curatorial consultant of the exhibition Fragmented Yet Connected, Paths to Wisdom at the Zhihua Temple, which is opening today on the UChicago campus here in Hong Kong. Joining us remotely, you will see on the screen from Chicago, pleased to welcome Dr. Timothy P. Harrison, professor of Near Eastern Archaeology and director of the Institute for the Study of Asian Cultures at the University of Chicago, or ISAC. Professor Harrison is a renowned academic leader and scholar with decades of research experience in the Middle East, and he is also a professor in the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations at the university. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Daisy Wang, the Deputy Director and Chief Curator at the Hong Kong Palace Museum. An award-winning international curator and institutional leader, Dr. Wang is responsible for the strategic and managerial direction of the museum's ambitious exhibition program and curatorial research. Dr. Wang also leads the museum's design and publishing teams. Dr. Wang will be co-presenting with Ms. Yannick Ma, the Assistant Curator of the Hong Kong Palace Museum. Ms. Ma's research interests include critical heritage studies and new museology. And at the Hong Kong Palace Museum, Ms. Ma has served as an in-house co-curator for the major exhibition, Ancient Egypt Unveiled, Treasures from Egyptian Museums, and has made many other curatorial contributions to other exhibitions. Since its opening in 2022, the Hong Kong Palace Museum has launched over 100 digital projects for its exhibitions and must consider how they harness the power of technology to create memorable visitor experiences while balancing and connecting objects, information, and technology. And I hope you will agree that the Hong Kong Palace Museum is the perfect partner to the university for this event, and we are delighted and most thankful that they have agreed to host us in this wonderful space. You heard earlier in terms of session format, we'll hear from our speakers, we'll go to a moderated panel discussion and have a chance for questions at the end. So do please submit your questions via the QR code or as instructed at the start. So we'd like to get underway and we'll invite Professor Lin to offer his remarks, followed by Professor Harrison and then Dr. Wang and Ms. Ma. So thank you very much.
Before our speakers begin their presentation, please be reminded that photography and video recording is not allowed for this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for the general introduction, and then the also thanks to everyone who comes to the event today, and of course I want to thank to the Palace Museum in Hong Kong for organizing the panel. So let's get on the way. If I can have my slide, okay, yes. So I want to use this very brief talk and this opportunity to introduce an exhibition that is called Fragmented and Connected, a Path to Wisdom at the Zhihua Temple that Elizabeth also mentioned about earlier in the introduction. And the exhibition is going to be open this afternoon at the University of Chicago campus. So I wish most of you can join us at the opening this afternoon. The exhibition is part of the University of Chicago's effort in digital humanities, and then our project is under the broader name is called Dispersed Chinese Art Digitization Project. And primarily, our work, as I will show you in a minute, so it's using the digital technology to remarriage the dispersed Chinese artifacts with their site of origin. So, and in this and in this exhibition, we're going to feature the Zhihua Temple in Beijing, as you can see on the screen. And then there's a tall building right there in the back, and that's called Wan Fo Ge, or 10,000 Buddha Pavilion. That's kind of the feature of our exhibition. And then the genesis of the exhibition is actually from these three images on the board. The one on the right I can see is the image of the Wan Fo Pavilion before things happened. As you can see that, above the Buddha, you can see a reset, what we call the recessed cover seating, or Zhaojing in Chinese. And then, so the picture was, the photo was taken in 1931. And then a few years later, of course, you can see now the Zhaojing, the cover seating right now, since 1933, has been installed in the Temple Room Gallery at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art in United States. And when I visit the temple for the very first time, 2014, you can see that the cover scene is gone already. So I think the juxtaposition of these three images together, of course, talks about the relocation of artifacts. Right? So, and I think the collections in the museums around the world all starts with this kind of relocation, or sometimes you can say the dislocation. But I think this relocation is not simply taking one artifacts from one place to take it down and then put it into another place alone. So I think in this removal by itself, it also involves the changing concepts and significance of the artifact itself. So DCADP as a project, the goal of the project primarily is trying to do something in reversal. So we want to take the artifacts down again and then digitally and put it back to its site of origin. But again, so when we remove one thing and put it in our context, it really involves two things. I think one thing is defragmentation, the other thing is recontextualization. And then when we do things in reversal, so the term that or the concept we like to propose is what we call the defragmentation. So the defragmentation is not to erase the trace of fragmentation, rather is to account for the both. So you have one thing on the right and the other thing on your left. So it can be layered in here, but it can be fragmented and yet they are connected. So I think the concept itself is not to think about how history destroys things. Rather, we want to use digital technology to think about how things can be recombined again, and so we can re-experience the artifact in its the original context. So to do that, our DCADP proposed two ideas. One is what we call the digital materiality, or a virtual materiality, and the other one is virtual visuality. So thinking about materiality and visuality digitally or virtually, rather than kind of, oftentimes we think about the one on the left, which is digitalized already, right, as a secondary to the one. We are hoping that, the replica that we made in the digital form can be a counterpart of the real thing. Right, so the counterpart can help us understand, the real things in what we call the virtually material sense. So let's see how we did it. So that's where the cover scene right now in the gallery. So as you can see that in the gallery, it's really a symbol of different things, including the murals from the Yuen dynasty, and you have Bodhisattva, you have some other things put together as a context. So what we did is that we do a scanning of the entire host sites, and then we begin to, so that's kind of becomes a virtual kind of gallery, and then we did a kind of virtual research. So the one on the right you can see is the diagram they use to put things in the gallery. So we want to do a reverse way. So we try to calculate everything in a virtual sense. So if you know anything about a 3D model, so the 3D model actually can have all the measurements correctly, only in a different order in the virtual world, right? So we calculate everything in order to produce the model right there. But this model is not just kind of something for you to look at, but also you can take it apart. So you can take it apart from the bottom all the way to top. So now when I say the virtual materiality is precisely this, we can't really touch it. But in the virtual sense, we begin to understand how the artifact was made up virtually, materially, right? So, and that's one thing that we did. And then the second thing that we do is that we go to the temple. So our temple on the second floor is the pavilion, the floor where the cover scene comes from. So once you go into the space right now, you can see the above the Buddha. There's nothing right there, right? So and then our team also did a meticulous scanning of the entire whole sites, and slowly, of course, we put them in the virtual sense this way. So, and I think it's quite important. So for anyone who wants to go to a site or thinking about something that's very physical and a material, you won't be able to see this. But then once we turn the things virtually, and then in a material sense, we can begin to see how the spaces relate to each other. So you can see that, for example, all these little dots that you can see, in the images, they actually represents the small kind of niche in each of which has a little Buddha. And altogether, throughout the first floor and second floor, there are 10,000 of them. That's the reason why it's called 10,000 Buddha Hall, right? So, but then, on the second floor, so it's right underneath the cover ceiling, which now is missing right there, is Vairochana Buddha. So Vairochana Buddha represents the Buddha of the entire universe, right? So it's right there, right there in the middle. It's supposed to be the circle supposed to be on the second floor right there. And then so once you go into the temple, the hall, from the first floor you have Shakyamuni Buddha, which is the Buddha of this world. You continue to walk on to the second floor, you have the Vairochana Buddha on the second floor, and then go above, then you have actually the cover scene that represents the greater universe. But now the sitting is missing. So, but through the virtual sense, we'll be able to put it back. So now you have it there, right there, right? So, and then we have all the diagrams there for us to understand really materially, though it's not really physically, but I will argue that it's a virtual sense that we begin to understand the space and then things in there. And here, then that's kind of our final stage of reconstruction. And then once you go into the building from the first floor to a second floor, and then you can kind of is prostrate down yourself, in front of the Buddha, and then you can see the cover scene right above that. So this is kind of the entire sense that we turn things kind of backward, reverse the process, defragment everything, and yet produce a virtual world for us to walk into that. So just a little kind of video for us to look at. So once you walk up to the second floor, you walk slowly, you see the three kind of Buddhas, and our cover scene right now is in place already, right? So slowly, and then you can walk through, and of course, what you're seeing right there is a simulation. So I think it's quite important. I think for the digital technology, what we can do is that we can simulate the potential or possibility of seeing the entire whole space, as you can walk into it. But this virtual world, of course, is not existing anywhere. When you go to the real site, it's not there. When you go to the museum, you see this cover scene, and yet you don't really have the entire whole thing, right? So, but I think I will argue that what you're seeing right there is what we call the virtual visuality that presents not the real thing, but yet through this kind of the virtuality, we'll be able to kind of give you a new vision. For example, what you're seeing right there is a manipulation of the space. We try to kind of add some atmosphere, so you'll begin to see the aura, and then the entire room in the aura, and then slowly you backtrack to see the entire whole thing. But of course, you don't forget about that thing right there. So I think one thing can only in one place at a time, but virtual reality enable the understanding of one thing in different spaces, connecting the different space and different times. And I think that's kind of the essence of what we do, right? And also in this more inclusive kind of paradigm rather than exclusive, which means that a lot of times we think about artifacts can be only one not the, it can the authenticity is so important. It's one thing, one thing can only exist in one space. But if we think about more kind of inclusively, then we can begin to think about an artifact as almost like a person who travels from one side to the other side. And then so I think, only in that sense, then we begin to see the biographical accounts, a narrative, a history of an item that exists not in one moment, but in a flow of time, right? So, and then I would suggest that, in a lot of museums, we have different artifacts, and each of the artifact has its own, or has its story and narrative for us to recount. And then I think that's kind of the beauty of the kind of digital technology that can help us to reconstruct not only the space and then the artifact, but also its history and its meaning. Thank you.
Dr. Lin, thank you very much. Fascinating, and visuals are amazing. So I would now like to welcome Professor Harrison to join us, again, from Chicago and on your screen. So thank you, Professor Harrison.
Good evening from Chicago, or good morning there in Hong Kong. It's a real pleasure to join you today and on this discussion about the role of digital technologies in heritage preservation and research in museums and universities. Let me share my screen here. As repositories of environmental and human history and culture, museums are uniquely positioned to participate meaningfully and substantively in the rapidly expanding frontier of computational data-driven knowledge discovery. And this morning, I want to take things in a slightly different direction than my colleague did with the imaging. I want to look at the deep time perspective and richly textured empirical record of carefully curated museum collections that afford us the opportunity, I believe, to contribute to the investigation of complex global issues, ranging from human environmental interaction and climate change to health and nutrition, urbanization, and infrastructural development, as well as complex societal challenges such as conflict, inequality, and migration. The widespread and expanding destruction of cultural heritage is another topic I want to touch on very briefly, which is an especially acute crisis in the part of the world where I work, which is the Middle East. So just a brief background, we've already mentioned, I'm at the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures, formerly the Oriental Institute, perhaps more familiar. And it is, in addition to a research institute, has a large collection from the Middle East, curated over more than 100 years of active field research in the Middle East, with extensive collections from pretty much every cultural sphere and civilization in the Middle Eastern and Eastern Mediterranean context. It also has a very rich history of pioneering exploration and discovery. Perhaps the most famous is the epigraphic survey that was and is continued to be conducted in Luxor, Egypt. And it has this one I singled out partly because we'll come back to this in a couple of minutes. Connects very specifically to the one of the important parts of the exhibition that is opening there at the Hong Kong Palace Museum. And that is that what you're looking at in this slide is the ongoing work of the epigraphic survey at the Temple of Medinat Habu, mortuary temple complex of Ramses III. The Institute also has participated in groundbreaking interdisciplinary research, perhaps most famously associated with the working closely with Libby in the development of radiocarbon dating, which led to the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1960. These carefully curated, excavated, and curated and analyzed data sets over 100 years have developed and emerged now into an enormous and very diverse body of data. And this is something that we have begun to get actively involved in recent years, beginning to transform this data, much of it originally collected in a analog form, and moving it into a computational digital environment. And this has enabled us to begin becoming more actively involved in these kinds of large, complex global issues. I just cite here some very quick examples. This project, the Crane Project, involving large-scale data analysis and the reconstruction of human environment interaction in the Middle East. It involves climate data, but also extensive settlement pattern and archaeological sequences from various regions of the Middle East. Other projects that I could name that are ongoing at the Institute that involve this kind of digital data, curated, as I said, from our excavations in the collections of the museum, are an ancient DNA project that's ongoing, looking at genomes, migration theory, and actual patterns of migration, and the culture as it relates to the cultures and early civilizations of the Middle East. A lot of textual analysis. The Institute is well known for its long dictionary projects. These have now begun to engage very actively with artificial intelligence, dealing with problems of heterogeneous ontologies. I don't have time to explain all of that here this morning, but very briefly, just give you one quick example where this is happening. Some of you may have heard of the Chicago Assyrian Dictionary, a project that took place over about 100 years, almost the entire length of the history of the Institute. You can see the 26 some volumes that resulted, hard copy. You can see some of my colleagues working with the actual card index files that they produced with thousands and thousands of entries over time. These sources of information, an incredibly rich body of knowledge of ancient Mesopotamian history and civilization, have been digitized and now moving into a rich, highly integrated database. And in this past year, we have been working very closely with colleagues in computer science on the development of tools using various AI technologies. I will mention one of them now, since it's in the news almost every day these days. Anthropic Claude has been working with closely on the development of some of these kinds of tools. These kinds of research also are really, really important for not only the knowledge that they give for us in those of us who are studying this ancient historic context, but it also, as I've been saying, brings that information into modern debates and discussions about some of the complex issues that I alluded to at the beginning of my presentation. Finally, one other important area is cultural heritage preservation. As I mentioned, cultural heritage is at risk intensively these days, and particularly in the Middle East, now more than perhaps any other time in history. War, urban sprawl, economic development, and looting are some of the classic problems that lead to this kind of damage. And this has led to the establishment and the Institute of the Chicago Center for Cultural Heritage Preservation, led by my colleague, Professor Gil Stein. The center is an interdisciplinary one with a global focus, not just on the ancient Near East, and it seeks to develop partnerships and innovative models to document and preserve and restore both tangible and intangible cultural heritage in the countries and communities across the regions where we work. Just two quick examples of the kind of cultural heritage preservation projects that Professor Stein has been involved in. One was in Afghanistan, a heritage mapping partnership with colleagues from Afghanistan and the ministry there. This was before the recent return of the Taliban. They were able to document more than 29,000 sites using satellite imagery with their on-the-ground ground truthing. And second and lastly, they were also able to build a database with the museum and heritage professionals in the museum in Kabul, and built this enormous digital inventory of records, which has become incredibly valuable in more recent years with the kinds of destruction that we have seen and reported in the news after the return of the Taliban to control of the country. My last example on the cultural heritage is my own work that I've been involved in southeastern Turkey. There have been many different conflicts, but in this case, the most damaging one has been very, very recent in 2023 with the massive earthquakes that destroyed much of the region. And we've been working very closely with local cultural heritage professionals and museum specialists to try and bring together the broken and damaged sculptures that we had been working on before the earthquake, trying to reconstruct them using various kinds of 3D digital imaging, also compositional analysis through XRF analysis. And just to kind of show you the possibilities here, we were able to find a fragment that is currently stored in the basement of the Institute from the 1930s excavations. You see it in the circle in the lower right-hand corner. And our own excavations that had been ongoing up until the earthquake had found this statue, and we were able to bring these two together using the digital technologies that I've alluded to, bringing pieces that were thousands of miles apart to try and help us get a better understanding of these very spectacular sculptures. And of course, the last example on this is the one that we're going to hear about next. And just very quickly, to give you a couple of quick comments about the colossal statue of Tutankhamun, which was excavated first in the 1930s by the then Oriental Institute, which enabled them in their excavations at Medinet Habu to uncover thousands and thousands of artifacts. This colossal statue of Tutankhamun was one of those finds. It was discovered in 1930. The original statue stands at over 5 meters in height and weighs approximately 6 tons. It was created during the reign of Tutankhamun and holds the distinction of being the tallest ancient Egyptian statue currently in the Western Hemisphere. Well, the reason I want to mention this briefly now before my colleagues present on the material from the Palace Museum perspective is that back in the 1930s, when they were trying to reconstruct this, they were able to use a second statue, which is now, currently housed as a part of the permanent collections of the Cairo Museum. And that work enabled them to reconstruct what you see here today in the right-hand image, which is what is on display in the Isaac Museum, which has then now allowed our colleagues there in Hong Kong to work with it in a digital environment. And I'll leave that to them and just want to mention thanks to all the many colleagues that are involved with working on these different projects. It's a collective exercise, and I want to acknowledge them as well here this morning. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Professor Harrison. Fascinating, and thank you for building on Dr. Lin's presentation and sharing the wonderful uses of technology and the work that you do. And I will say for the audience, the slides work perfectly in the dress rehearsal. So we're so glad that you got them up and running. Thank you to the tech team as well. So I'd now like to welcome Dr. Wang, Daisy Wang, and Ms. Ma to present.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, now we're going to switch slides, and we're going to switch gear from universities to museums. We want to first start with introduction of the Hong Kong Palace Museum. If you haven't been here or haven't explored our newest exhibitions, so this museum brings together the finest of Chinese and world art, and that's our mission. We're a bridge, we're a window. Through exhibitions, through digital technologies, and through events like this, we want to solidify Hong Kong's position as a center for culture and artistic exchange. We are about 4 years old. We're going to celebrate our fourth anniversary in early July. So far, we have welcomed more than 4.5 million visitors, and we have just opened our 34th new exhibition. And we have done over 150 digital projects inside galleries for exhibitions. And we have partnered with many institutions for exhibitions and programs like this. So today, my colleague Yannick and I would like to share with you different types of digital projects we did for exhibitions. The first type, unfortunately, I think it closed a couple of days ago, is a wonderful exhibition called The Ways in Patterns. So this exhibition did not include any objects. So it's all digital, like you would experience this afternoon for Professor Lin's exhibition at the University of Chicago Hong Kong campus. So this exhibition really was inspired by a digitization project which utilized the digital data, basically beautiful images of designs and decorations on beautiful objects, to create a wonderful experience. And the second type of digital projects we have done for many exhibitions is artistic and imaginative. So this is an exhibition we did in collaboration with Palace Museum in Beijing and the Louvre to feature horses in Chinese and in world art. So what the artist, Jeffrey Shaw, has done is to use his imagination, but also based on images or 3D scanning of the objects to create flying horses to activate the space, but more in an artistic way. So imagine the museum gallery would be a theater. So this would be the setting. So very beautiful, very imaginative, and attract a lot of kids' attention and adults' attention alike. Now, we want to share with you a secret recipe. How do we do digital projects and how do we do exhibitions in the museum setting? Again, is a secret recipe, not the recipe, because there are many different ways to do things in galleries. So I want to share this iPop model developed and originated from the Smithsonian. This is called iPop. Each letter represents a concept. So in order to have good exhibition or even a good digital projects, the Smithsonian colleagues analyzed many successful exhibitions. They find that when you can mix these 4 ingredients in your fried rice and roughly in equilibrium, so basic equal sort of amount or equal attention or emphasis on these 4 ingredients, you perhaps could have a very good experience for visitors, because each of us have different entryways into exhibition. For example, think about yourself. You walk into an exhibition, what do you look first? I look at objects first. Some colleagues tell me that they're very afraid of objects. They look at text first. They have to read everything before they can even look at objects, right? So in these 4 ingredients, you'll see Professor Harrison talked a lot about your collection. You know, in museums, we have objects, no problem. Professor Lin, you did a lot of research. You got a lot of data. You are not short of ideas, right? So we are focusing on 2 other ingredients in these museums in general. We focus on people. We focus on physical. Now, let's give you an example. How do we do this iPop model for a multimedia element you can enjoy today after this talk? This is in Gallery 2. The exhibition is about 1 day inside of Forbidden City from the time when the emperor got up at 4 o'clock until he went to bed at 8 o'clock. He did actually get 8 hours sleep, so it's not so bad. So this multimedia feature really looks at the dreamscape of the emperor. So it's imaginative. It's based on a work. It's based on a calligraphy piece the emperor composed. He composed a poem to commemorate his deceased wife who died at the age of 36. He missed her for decades, although he has many other wives. So he wrote in this poem that he dreamed of her, and when he woke up, he was in tears, his pillowcase was wet, and he missed her so much. So we translate this poem into a dreamscape, you know, has his wife's beautiful faces showing up and has his poems in this dreamscape. So we got a people story, right? So we have emotions. And then we also allow visitors, invite them to actually lay down this couch-like thing so they can rest and they can dream with the emperor. So that's the idea. So you got the physical and the people. And of course, we have the object, we have the information as well. Now I also want to share with you some of the research we have done, because we're a public-facing institution. Yes, you are public-facing, like this afternoon's event, but also you serve the faculty and the students alike. But we face a vast amount of diverse audiences. Remember, we welcome 4.5 million visitors. So our key research question is that inside the gallery, how would people approach objects and digital technology? And we also have the assumption or intention that we want people to enjoy both. Perhaps these 2 elements can shed light on each other so people can look back and forth. So this exhibition we did to look at the treasures from Forbidden City and also from the Palace of Versailles. And we have a wonderful book-sized portrait of Qianlong Emperor down in the 18th century, very small and it's exquisite. And you pass by easily without even noticing it, but it's very important. So we actually set up a screen next to it, 2 screens of the same program to encourage our visitors to look at both. Now we did we have the data here. Out of over 100 visitors, about half of them first look at the screen, and then 34% look at the objects, and not so bad. 20% look at the text. Expected. And then we also asked them, have you looked, not just what first, but what you actually looked at? You see that, most people look at the three things. And most importantly, we are so happy to see that a quarter of the visitors actually compare the screen and the real object. So that's very happy result for us. Now, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Yannick, to talk about a very exciting project we have done for the Egyptian exhibition.
Thank you, Daisy. I'll continue with another digital project from the ongoing Egyptian exhibition, which featured 250 treasures from 7 important Egyptian museums and Saqqara. We used projection mapping technology to digitally reconstruct the colossal statue of Tutankhamun, which is one of the highlight objects from the exhibition. And as you can see here in these two photos, the statue with and without projection, the projection virtually reconstructs some of its lost colors and lost parts. It also shows how tall the complete statue would have been, which is over 5 meters. The projection plays at intervals so the audience could compare the statue's current status with its reconstructed appearance. And the idea of reconstruction emerged from our research of the statue as we uncovered more evidence about its lost colors. So the statue, well, we are reading about the archaeological report of the statue's exhibition, which was conducted by Oriental Institute, the forerunner of ISAC, as Professor Harrison just mentioned. I came across a watercolor that captured the colors of the statue immediately after it was unearthed, which is far more vivid than what we can see today. And there's also a paragraph that documented the original polychromy of the statue. That's when we began to think, how could we show the audience the lost colors of the statues without physically altering it? We then looked to other color restoration and reconstructions of other institutions for inspiration. And for example, one is a virtual restoration. And at the exhibition, Mark Ruffles' Harvard murals at the Harvard Arts Museum, they used projected light to restore the faded colors of the murals. And another example is building physical replica at the Met's exhibition, Chroma Asian Sculpture in Color. A dozen of color reconstruction of the Asian, Roman, and Greek sculpture would play alongside their Asian counterparts. And given our available resources, we chose projection mapping. And in this approach, the reconstruction is a digital information that we combine with the statue. And beyond color reconstruction, the twin of the statue we're exhibiting is now housed at the ISAC Museum and underwent physical reconstruction in the 1930s. And the restoration did not only address the colors, it also reconstructed missing parts, including the crown, arms, legs, and the base. So they're returning the statue to its complete form and the original height. So the result ISAC statue provides us important reference when reconstructing the statue to its complete form. And now we turn to the technical challenges for the projection reconstruction. Unlike a flat surface, projection onto a flat surface is relatively simple, but the statue is a 3-dimensional object with uneven surfaces. So a 3D model is needed in order to correctly calibrate light onto the object. However, neither the Cairo statue nor the ISAC statue have been 3D scanned, and arranging for professional scanning wasn't possible within our time frame. So we need to build a 3D model from scratch. And for its general form, we refer to the photogrammetric models of the Cairo statue, and then we further digitally sculpted the geometry for rounds of adjustment with reference to the photographs of the Cairo statue from different angles. And for the missing part, we reference the photographs of the ISAC statue. Therefore, the 3D model we built is only a recreation of our hypothetical reconstruction. It's only for the foundation for the projection calibration, so it's not a metrically precise digital twin of the statue. And for the colors, we reference the watercolor and text description from the archaeological report. There are also some more color traces left on the Carol statue that give us more color clues that were not recorded in the report. And the ISIC statue help us to determine the colors on the missing parts. And when the statue is finally installed in our gallery, we carry out extensive on-site adjustment. And on the left, you can see in the first test, much of the lights was misaligned. And in the final result, the lights fits perfectly. And to conclude, digital technology allow us to carry out virtual reconstruction that simulates the result of physical restoration. However, since the evidence about the original appearance of the statue is fragmentary, so our results can only be a recreation of a hypothetical reconstruction that involves uncertainty. And it is one plausible interpretation of how the statue might have been appeared 3,000 years ago, intended to give us an idea of its look in antiquity. And the purpose of this project is to invite the audience to imagine the statue as it once stood 3,000 years ago with 5 meters tall and with vibrant colors. And more broadly, we also hope this project could demonstrate that many ancient Egyptian cultures were not the plain stone we often see today. They were in fact very colorful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of our speakers and also for being such good timekeepers. That does give us a chance for question and answers. I'm going to kick us off with one question. I'll then go do a couple of audience questions. And if we have time, I'll do one final wrap-up question before we leave everyone to explore this amazing museum with the inspiration here this morning. So each of you works at the intersection of physical objects and digital tools, and you've shared so many amazing examples. So in your own words, I would love to understand from each of you, if you had to narrow it down to one, what is the single most important way digital technologies have changed how you ask questions about heritage? So I'm going to put you on the spot since you're right here to my left. Dr. Lin, could you boil it down to one single most important way, if you could?
Well, thank you. I think I'll probably just say it's really what we call revision. So it's revision. So seems like the digital technology really provides different ways of looking. Just a photography, when photography appeared, it would change the way of our seeing things. And if you look at the history of imaging technology, every new technology will bring about a new different ways of seeing. And I think what we are seeing right now is precise that. And the new ways of seeing, we kind of prompt us to think about world and then artifacts in a very different way. So I think that's kind of the precise kind of ideas I like to promote.
Amazing. I'll stay here in the room, and then Professor Harrison will go to you last. So Dr. Wang, how would you describe in your own words that single most important aspect of digital technology?
In the museum context, I would say imperative, because we cannot avoid it. Why can't we embrace it? So we have been very proactive in actually putting technology in exhibitions dealing with heritage and particularly with antiquities. I think the audience here is still different from the audiences I work with in the United States. I think in Hong Kong and in mainland China, the audience are very interested. They're interested in technology. They're interested in exploring new things. So I think really coming here almost, I came here 7 years ago, and I really find exciting to work with audiences who are so open-minded, who embrace technology. So basically, this is our mindset. We want to embrace technology.
Wonderful, thank you. Ms. Ma?
And I would like to address this question maybe very specific to the case of the reconstruction of the colossal statue. And I think now we are combining more digital technology with heritage presentation. And some of my critics does that take away our focus on the object and see it as like a light show, like steal away our audience attention from the objects to the digital materials. Yeah, there is this question. And however, for our project, we try to balance the rhythm between the projection on time and the off time, so the audience could compare both the original status and also with its reconstructed appearance.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Professor Harrison, would you like to respond to that question?
I'd like to echo Professor Lin's comments, but move it more to data rather than sort of the more visualization aspect, which for us has, when we take these kinds of curated data sets or collections that I was alluding to in my talk, with this kind of technology enables us to it's a terrible word to use, but atomize or break the information down into incredibly smaller and smaller bits of information, and then to using these tools, these technological tools, to look at the relationships and all the different connections. It's a much more complex and highly textured picture that we get to see this way. And that enables us to really engage and participate in some of these very complex issues like migration, like climate change, that requires a very complex approach to trying to get into a deeper understanding of them. So this is, I mean, it's a kind of a multi-answered question, but it's still, if there's one thing, it's the ability to really kind of dig deeply into the highly textured information that are in our collections.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to ask an audience question that somewhat, Professor Harrison, piggybacks on what you just touched on. And it's, I guess, reflecting the fact that various archaeological and heritage preservations are led by multiple entities across the world, across zones of conflict, and you did touch on that in some of your slides. And so the question is, to what extent do you work with like the UNESCO Virtual Museum of Stolen Cultural Objects? Do you have experience in working across different kind of, I guess, multilateral organizations in the work that you do? And again, any digital aspect of that would be welcome in terms of data or some of the other digital technology components to that question.
So on the excavation or the, let's say, the discovery fieldwork side, the field projects are incredibly diverse. We have everything sort of from A to Z, not just archaeology, but all the way through to zoology. We have an incredibly diverse interdisciplinary mix of scholars and specialists working, trying to look at all the different types of information that we can gather from the fieldwork side. So that would be on that side. In terms of the cultural heritage preservation and the issue of conflict and destruction of heritage, these international bodies, absolutely. I wish I could bring my colleague Gil Stein into this because he's really at the forefront of those discussions. And I'm about to head off to a conference that he's organized at our other Chicago center, which is the Boyer Center in Paris, where we'll have a 3-day conference on the role of digital technologies in dealing with cultural heritage preservation. But absolutely, UNESCO, other international agencies are a crucial part of all of that. And one of the things that they're talking about, and I'm sure will be a big part of this conversation next week, is the building of inventories that come out of these destroyed and chaotic environments when there is conflict and destruction. Material starts to move. There's an enormous problem with antiquities trafficking, billions and billions of dollars of illicit trafficking. And one of the crucial issues is that my colleague Gil Stein is really pushing is the need to create this kind of global inventory that we can track and also help to protect artifacts when they go missing or when there is a destruction or damage through natural or human conflict contexts.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the good work that you're doing in that regard. This question's for Dr. Lin, but it's such a good one from an audience member. I am going to ask everyone to give their response to this. So Dr. Lin, to you first, what is a dream project that you would like to see realized, again, with an emphasis perhaps on digital technology? No budget, no political limitations, no constraints, blue sky thinking. What would be your dream project? And we'll let all of the panelists weigh in on that as well.
That's not possible. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, so because we have so many historical sites of cultural heritage in China, and then, the team just talked about the dynamics, that involves a lot of different kind of institutions and parties and the stakeholders. I think while we're doing things on the ground, we also feel that way. So there are a lot of restrictions, there are a lot of protocols that you have to get through. So thinking about dreaming about that is almost impossible. But I think I think ideally because digital technology is really about democratic, so it provides equal access for everyone to the cultural heritage of ours and also the world's, right? So I think that's kind of I don't really have one, but I just feel like if that's possible, that for every interest, the users and then viewers, they can access any way they want to do, and then I think that's kind of the reason why I want to use technology. Otherwise, you just go to sites to see yourself, or that probably will be more kind of the tangible. But I think technology for me is really it's a method. It's not a means. We don't build technology for its own sake. We build technology for the purpose, and the purpose is really to have everyone share that world heritage, Chinese heritage among those people in the audience. So I think that's kind of the dream I have.
Wonderful, thank you, Dr. Wang.
My problem is that I have too many dream projects, but also I have to also think about the practicalities as well. So one of my dream projects is to create an experience inside the Hong Kong Palace Museum that really can allow visitors to feel, to experience the architecture of the Forbidden City. Because we're a Hong Kong Palace Museum, we're not a branch museum. We have a lot of objects. But how we don't have those interiors and exteriors of the buildings, as Professor Lin just showed. So what about a project that really you don't have to travel to Beijing? I know you want to travel to Beijing, that's great too, but not everybody can also travel every day to Beijing. But what about they can touch the virtual walls, they can touch the virtual objects, and they can sleep on the real bed of the emperor? But in general, what I'm hoping to do is that in our future projects with the contents, with basically Palace Museum themes, we would create more experiential exhibitions for our visitors so they can really experience all the sensory things inside Forbidden City. I have never been successful of activating the sense of smell, but hopefully virtually we can also do something in the future.
Love that, thank you. Ms. Ma, and then Professor Harrison.
And to think very boldly, and also specific to the Egyptian exhibition, I would like that if it is possible, I would like to 3D scan all ancient Egyptian sculptures to provide a very big data, and then we can have AI to assist us to reconstruct a more accurate reconstruction based on this data. Yes.
I like the bold vision. Thank you very much. Professor Harrison.
I agree with this is an impossible question. So I'm going to answer it, I suppose, in a kind of general way. And that is often we fear, those of us who come at the study of culture from humanistic perspectives, that technology can, and especially these kinds of computational digital technologies, can all too often create a kind of homogenizing impact on culture. And in fact, I think what's been demonstrated this morning is the diversity and the richness of that diversity. And so for me, the dream is that we can continue to use these methods and technologies, but in a way that can help to really highlight and express and celebrate the incredible range of human experience and diversity, not just in and of itself, but as a way of learning more about each other, but also learning more collectively. And experiences like this, sitting in Chicago and being able to have time together virtually and remotely with colleagues in Hong Kong is an example of that kind of experience or cross-cultural experience. I think it's incredibly rich, and I can't help but, Daisy, remember meeting you in Beijing, and which was one of the ways that we got to have a conversation about participating in today's gathering. So, as an example, just to kind of illustrate that kind of possibility, it's an incredibly rich thing when it happens that way.
Thank you very much. Well, we wish you were here with us in person, but your remarks very well received here in the room. So thank you. Just again, on behalf of the university, I want to thank my colleagues here, academic colleagues, and also to Dr. Wang and to Ms. Ma and to the Hong Kong Palace, of course, for Palace Museum hosting us here for this amazing session in this fantastic venue. And thank you to our audience members virtually and those of you in the room for joining us today.
What an amazing discussion. Thank you so much for all the speakers and the moderator for such an inspiring discussion. Please put our hands together and give them another round of applause. Time flies. This Zoom webinar is now coming to an end. Thank you, Dr. Harrison, for joining us from the US, as well as all our online audience. See you next time.